What exactly is child sex trafficking?
Simply stated, child sex trafficking is the buying and selling of children. The more detailed definition is that child sex trafficking includes recruiting, harboring, transporting, obtaining, patronizing, or soliciting a minor for a commercial sex act. The bottom line is that the crime is about the exploitation of kids, which may or may not involve movement.
Are we seeing child sex trafficking here in Indiana?
Yes, unfortunately, child sex trafficking does occur in Indiana, according to the National Human Trafficking Resource Center. In 2015 in Indiana, there were 53 cases that were reported to this organization, and of those 53 cases, 13 involved minors. The year before, children and youth accounted for about half of the sex trafficking cases in Indiana. Based on additional data from the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, they tell us that 1 out of every 5 runaways reported that they were likely a victim of sex trafficking.
Are we seeing an increase in child sex trafficking cases?
Unfortunately, the experts at the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children do tell us that the number of cases is growing each year. We know that more children are actually being identified as victims. At this point, it's really difficult to determine if the crime itself is becoming more prevalent or if it's an increased awareness and attention that's resulted in the increased reporting. Part of the challenge remains getting an accurate count of the number of kids affected. It's difficult to count when the victims are not properly identified. So this is where it makes it even more important that, as with any crime against children, awareness is critical so that we can make sure that we properly identify the number of kids impacted.
What does child sex trafficking look like?
When people hear the term child sex trafficking, they often think of abductions. Actually, abductions are fairly rare and only account for about 9% of the cases. According to both survivors and experts, this crime often starts with trust being developed, where those relationships are formed over time. And during this trust building period, the trafficker is learning more about the victims so they can manipulate and exploit them. The perpetrators often prey on victims desired for friendship, a significant other, a mother or a parent or a father figure. Unfortunately, this is made even easier with social media, where perpetrators can really cast out a wide net. They can connect quickly to kids, and they can easily get details about that child's life.
Where does child sex trafficking happen?
While we've heard about child sex trafficking in connection with large events, experts also tell us that it can and often does actually happen in everyday communities. Many of us have a mental picture of child sex trafficking taking place in dark, creepy, seedy locations with individuals that also meet that description. However, for example, one survivor talked about how it was a bunch of young women going to a college party. Maybe it might be a group walking into a fancy hotel or a house party. All of those things we would describe as being normal or typical. They didn't raise any red flags. Unfortunately, that is what child sex trafficking can look like and often does look like in Indiana. Consistent with many crimes, experts are also concerned about the escalated negative impact that comes when you add drugs into the equation. Specifically, there's a concern in Indiana with our heroin and meth epidemic that the experts tell us that could lead parents to traffic their own children for income.
What's being done in Indiana to combat child sex trafficking?
Indiana actually has 3 new laws that are aimed at addressing human trafficking of a minor. Public Law 75 expands the definition of sex offenders to include child sex traffickers. Public Law 59 addresses those who frequent or maintain locations referred to as common nuisances where human trafficking is taking place, making them misdemeanors and felonies respectively. Finally, Public Law 46 focuses on the Department of Child Services, adding human or sex trafficking offenses to the list of offenses under which a child may be designated as a child in need of services. So this makes it possible for this Department of Child Services to step in and take action. It also addresses situations where a parent, guardian, or foster parent may actually be involved in the trafficking themselves. In addition to our legislative actions taking place in Indiana, the Indiana Youth Services Association is creating a statewide network of service providers to connect so that we make sure those victims get the services they need.
How can people help these kids, or how can the kids get help?
The first step is always awareness. Secondly, it's important to remember that every Hoosier is a mandated reporter of child abuse and neglect, which obviously also includes child sex trafficking. If you see something or you have a sense that a situation is suspect, go ahead and call the hotline. That's why it's there. You can reach the hotline at 1-800-800-5556. There's also a National Human Trafficking Hotline, which can be reached at 1-888-373-7888, or you can text HELP to INFO.